Good afternoon, Charlotte and North Carolina. I am Dave Bullock, and I'm proud to be your Republican nominee for North Carolina Auditor. I stand before you proudly endorsed for that job by President Donald J. Trump. Every day, though, I'm asked, why in the world am I running to be the state auditor? Right? I guess it's like my slogan on my new palm card says, I'm reasonable, I'm qualified, but I'm a little bit nerdy. I've got experience as a prosecutor, a businessman, and as a leader making decisions in the face of liberal opposition. And the auditor is, of course, a down-ballot statewide race, an important office with a serious mission to hold government accountable for spending your tax dollars. We need, quite frankly, a conservative to count the money. Yes? More than that, the auditor checks government for economy and efficiency, and I think we can all agree that government can be a little more efficient, right? And if the auditor is responsible for making things more efficient, I can't think anywhere better to start than with the DMV. We're going to audit the DMV top to bottom, and we're going to turn that agency around to make it work for you. Our team will make government more effective, more responsive, and more accountable, and the state auditor is a vital cog in our state's economy. I'm here today because this election is vital to the continued success of our nation and our state. Ultimately, the leadership of our nation and our state directly affects our national and state economy. We cannot trust a Harris-Walz administration to be in charge of the economy of the greatest country on the planet. We can trust Donald Trump and JD Vance. We can trust President Trump and Senator Vance to bring down inflation. We can trust them to establish fair and successful tax policies like no tax on tips that will benefit all hardworking Americans. And we can trust Donald Trump and JD Vance to make the tough economic policy decisions while keeping America strong and protecting our southern border. President Donald J. Trump and Senator Vance have a proven track record in business. They have a record of common sense, a record of understanding the ups and downs of the economy, and they have the experience and the steady hand to manage unforeseen economic events that may lie on the horizon. President Trump and Senator Vance have the ability to get the economy moving while keeping America strong. Successful, experienced, trustworthy leadership, and the backbone to get the job done. Ladies and gentlemen, qualifications matter. There is no team more qualified than Donald J. Trump and Senator JD Vance. But folks, let's be honest. We can't govern if we don't win. So I encourage you to tell folks everywhere that you've got to go vote for President Trump, and you've got to finish the ballot from top to bottom for conservatives in North Carolina. And wrap that ballot up by voting for the constitutional amendment in North Carolina to preserve citizen-only voting. We have to pass that amendment. Folks, we cannot win the presidency and give away Raleigh in the courthouse. We've got to win it all. We've got to turn it red. Again, I stand here as the Republican nominee, the most qualified person in that race to keep state spending in check as your next state auditor. Likewise, it is clear that Donald J. Trump and Senator JD Vance are clearly the most qualified folks to get the job done, and we must help them to be the next president and vice president of the United States of America. Your candidate for state auditor, auditordave.com. Let's go make it happen in November. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome U.S. Congressman Dan Bishop and candidate for Attorney General.
I'm Congressman Dan Bishop. Thank you. Love you too. I'm your nominee to become the first Republican Attorney General for North Carolina since Zeb Walzer in 1896. I want to tell you a little bit about that 1896 election and its aftermath, because although you might be surprised, it has a bearing on the 43 days that lie ahead to this election. In that 1896 campaign in which Zeb Walzer was elected AG, a coalition of Republicans and populists, whites and blacks, united to defeat the segregationist Democrat Party and elected not just a Republican governor and attorney general, but a reform-minded North Carolina legislature committed on returning power to the people. The white supremacists who controlled the Democrat Party committed to retaking power by any means necessary. In 1898, they fought back with a crusade of intimidation, voter suppression, election fraud, assault, and even murder, targeting the governing coalition. Cheered on by a complicit press, led by the Raleigh News and Observer's Josephus Daniels, Democrats sent even armed terrorist thugs around the state, threatening and assaulting black and white voters. On Election Day, they won total power and moved immediately to disenfranchise blacks and relegate all Republicans to long-term powerlessness. Just 2 days later, in Wilmington, Democrats rolled a Gatling gun into downtown, burned the city's thriving black newspaper, murdered an unknown number of black and white Republican political leaders, and violently overthrew the city's Republican government. 75 years would pass before North Carolina would elect another Republican governor. 112 years before Republicans would again control the General Assembly. And now, 126 years later, this year, North Carolina will elect a Republican Attorney General. But some things haven't changed, like Democrat methods. For almost a decade, Democrats nationally have abused investigative and prosecutorial power to destroy President Trump, his family, and his movement, egged on by a complicit media. In the name of democracy, Democrats used state power to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop, to admit 10 million illegal aliens to swamp our communities. They lied in unison about Biden's competency, conducted a soft coup when the lie was exposed, and proclaimed a nominee who never received a vote. And last week in North Carolina, Democrats and allied media rolled out a meticulously timed and coordinated character assassination and immediately sent mailings, ads, broadcasts, and posts smearing all Republicans by association while claiming the high ground. Kamala Harris can't explain how she'll lower the cost of living or secure the border. Homicides are up another 40% in Charlotte, 8 law enforcement officers were gunned down in April and 4 died. But Josh Stein can't explain why crime soars and juveniles are out of control. And Jeff Jackson can't explain why he always voted to undermine law enforcement. They have no ideas or answers that work for the people. That's right. So they seek instead to demoralize and intimidate, just like 1898. But this time, 2 things are different. First, we know them too well. And second, they've never seen anything like Donald Trump. I'm running for Attorney General to restore a culture of law and order across this state for the safety of all. I'm running for Attorney General to protect your God-given freedoms for the success and flourishing of all. I've learned from President Trump, and we will fight for you. Vote for Donald Trump and JD Vance. Vote for Republicans down the ballot. And if you will please, vote for Dan Bishop and Republican supermajorities. Make North Carolina great again so North Carolina can help President Trump make America great again. Let's go!
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the next Vice President and Second Lady of the United States, Senator JD Vance and Usha Vance.
Why don't we learn these United States were the ones who made it work? Let the rest of the world help us forge the England that's bigger than earthquakes. Highways and bridges. Thank you, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, my friends, it is great to be in Charlotte, and in 43 days, we are going to turn North Carolina red and the whole country right along with it. I am thrilled to have so many great patriots. I'm grateful to all of you for joining us today. I'm especially grateful to have my lovely wife, Usha. Usha looks great in that dress, honey. I love that dress. Thank you. We've also got some other distinguished guests here. I want to give a shout out just before we get started. We have got Congressman Greg Murphy. Where's Greg at? Greg, thank you for everything, man. Thank you for your leadership. You all have an incredible nominee for Attorney General in the state of North Carolina, Dan Bishop. Thank you, Dan. We also have Republican nominee for Labor Commissioner, Luke Farley. Where is Luke at? Raise your hand, Luke. Thank you, man. And then we've got Republican nominee for North Carolina Auditor. We have got Dave Bollock. Where's Dave at? Thank you, man. So we have got 43 or 42 days to the election. And North Carolina is one of our most important states. And I got to say, North Carolina is becoming like a second home to me. But North Carolina is a second home to me, and it is going to be the state that turns this country red. We're going to send Donald Trump back to the White House, and we're going to do it thanks to the great patriots of this state. Now, sometimes, my friends, politics is complicated. But this race is about as simple as it could be, and you can tell that it's simple because Kamala Harris, more than any candidate in the history of presidential politics, is running away from a record instead of to a record. And there are all these different takes, all these different spins we can put on this race, but I think the most simple and the most direct is that Donald Trump had a record to be proud of and Kamala Harris has a record to be ashamed of. So we're not going to promote her. We're going to say, Now, it's funny, Kamala is as afraid of the American media, even though most of the media is friendly to Kamala, as she is some of the most hostile leaders all over the world. And I happen to believe that if you have a vice president who is terrified to speak to the American people and terrified to give an interview to the American media, that she belongs nowhere near the Oval Office. I mean, think about this. How can we trust Kamala Harris to represent us in front of the most dangerous regimes in the world if she won't even sit for an interview with the American media? Now, I say that, and I admit that I'm a little biased here, because part of the reason I think Kamala Harris should do some interviews is because the American people deserve it. But part of the reason I want Kamala Harris to do some interviews is because every time she opens her mouth, I think Donald Trump and I gain about 100,000 votes. So, and I don't know of the few interviews that she has given, I don't know if it's one or two, but it's not that many. It's funny to try to have her answer what her actual plans are for the American people. You know, the press back here, we've got some reporters and we'll take some questions in a little bit, but the press will ask Kamala Harris, what is your specific plan to lower the cost of groceries, to lower the cost of housing, which of course have gone up wildly under the policies of Kamala Harris? And you know what she'll say? She'll say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family, and I know the struggles. Or she'll say, you know, when I was a little girl, my parents had a very nice lawn. She'll say anything but what her actual plans are to lower the inflation that she caused. She'll say anything other than talk about how she's going to fix the problems that her administration led to. She will do anything to avoid answering the very simple fact that Kamala Harris has made the American people's lives worse. And on November 5th, the state of North Carolina is going to say to Kamala Harris, you're fired. Go back to San Francisco, where you belong. Now, let's just go through the ways in which Kamala Harris has made the lives of North Carolinians worse off. You know that it costs over $1,000 more per month to afford the same things that you would have afforded 3.5 years ago. That's more than $12,000 a year just to afford the same quality of life as when Donald Trump was president. Now, that's not it, of course, because everything has become more expensive under the policies of Kamala Harris. She casts the tie-breaking vote on almost $4 trillion of wasteful spending, where she taxed money from the American taxpayer, sent it off to China and to foreign regimes all over the world, printed money we didn't have to give it to other people, and now the American families can't afford basic middle-class necessities. You go to a grocery store, the price of eggs when Donald Trump left office was about $1.50 a dozen. The price of eggs, the average now, is close to $4 a dozen, thanks to the policies of Kamala Harris. And I'll tell you, I know this very personally because my kids, we got a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and they eat a whole lot of eggs every morning. So I feel it as much as anybody. I see it as much as anybody, because we are, you know, it takes a lot of food to feed 3 hungry kids. Now, we took our boys, actually, I'll tell you a story. We took our boys with us on the campaign trail just a couple of days ago when we were in Pennsylvania. And we went to a Hispanic grocery store in Reading, Pennsylvania, and my 2 boys came along with me. And it illustrates how, you know, sometimes kids, their personalities are just inborn, you know? Because we took our 7-year-old boy and our 4-year-old boy, and we go to this grocery store, and I was so proud of my 4-year-old because he set a goal for himself that he was going to do 100 reading lessons with his mama, and he actually accomplished that goal last Saturday. So we're very proud of our 4-year-old. Give him a round of applause. So I say, boys, you can come on the campaign trail with me, and we're going to get you anything you want at this grocery store. And of course, the 4-year-old wants a candy bar, but the 7-year-old, I'm literally talking on camera about the price of eggs and the price of groceries in this grocery store. And my 7-year-old's like, Dad, we need to get a dozen eggs. And I'm like, son, when I said you could get anything, I meant like a Snickers bar or an ice cream. And he's like, no, Dad, you cooked the last 3 eggs this morning. If we don't get eggs, we're not going to have any more eggs. And the 7-year-old, he's got his mama's personality. Very practical, worried about whether we have enough eggs. And right now, all across our country, we've got a lot of families that are cutting back because of Kamala Harris's war on affordability in this country. And Donald Trump and I believe in a very simple principle, my friends. We believe that if you work hard and play by the rules, you ought to be able to afford a nice life for your American family. It's that simple. And that is not that hard. We just got to get better leadership and common sense economic policies back in the White House. We got to get Kamala Harris out of there and put Donald Trump back where he belongs, leading this great country and pursuing common sense economic policies. Now, let's just tick through a few more things. Gas prices are up over 30% thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Groceries in total are up about 25% in the state of North Carolina thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. A gallon of milk now north of $4. Ground beef was about $3.50 a pound when Donald Trump left office. It's now close to $6 a pound thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. My friends, we could do so much better. And to the folks watching on TV or who will see clips of this is not hard. There are some things in politics that are hard, some issues that are complicated, but we just need to get back to common sense economic policies so that American families can afford to feed their children the food that they want. American families, we want American families to be able to afford to buy a home again. Think about this. The American dream, it means different things to different people. To me, it always meant becoming a good husband and a good father. But to a lot of families out there, the American dream doesn't exist without home ownership. People want to own a stake in this country that all of us love. Well, thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, housing is 56% more expensive than it was just 3 years ago. Now, I know a lot of us know young Americans, young families, our kids, our grandkids, and we just want them to be able to afford that American dream of homeownership. But thanks to Kamala Harris, it's not happening. And we got to remember, it's not just because Kamala Harris cast that tie-breaking vote on trillions of dollars in new spending. It's also because Kamala Harris let 25 million illegal aliens into this country. And as much as the media doesn't like to talk about this, when you let in 25 million people into your country that shouldn't be here, and you have them compete against Americans for scarce homes, that drives housing through the roof, and that's exactly what we've seen. This border invasion has made homeownership unaffordable for the majority of American families. And I happen to believe that we ought to have a president who says American homes go to American citizens, not to foreigners who don't even deserve to be in this country in the first place. Now, here's the other problem. We talk about the border crisis, because that is maybe the most significant unforced error of Kamala Harris's administration, is we have got 25 million illegal aliens. Now, you know what kind of stress that puts on the municipal budget of Charlotte? You know how hard it is to afford to provide housing and health care for your citizens when Kamala Harris lets in millions upon millions of people who shouldn't even be here. And that is exactly what she has done. Thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, you've got a lot of American families and a lot of American cities that can't afford to provide basic necessities to their citizens. But it's also just a huge problem for crime and public safety. Now, a lot of you know my personal story. A lot of you know that I grew up in a working class family and I was raised by my grandmother. I called her Mamaw. Like a lot of Appalachian people, I called my grandmother Mamaw. And by the way, let's give a shout out to all the great grandparents in the room right now who are helping take care of kids. We love you. But think about this. When I was, part of the reason my Mamaw raised me is because my mom, God love her, struggled with opioid addiction for a big chunk of her early life. And there are so many great blessings that came from having my grandmother raise me, but one of them is I just had safety and stability that I wouldn't have had without her. Now, I'm proud to stand here today and say that my mom has been clean and sober for almost 10 years, and we're so grateful for it. Thank you. And for those of you who are struggling with addiction, or those of you who have families struggling with addiction, there really is hope in recovery. But there's only hope in recovery if we give people that second chance that we know all American families are eventually going to need from time to time. And I remember as a teenager, my mom had taken something that she shouldn't have taken, and I was so terrified that she was never going to wake up from this coma. And I was in the hospital, and a few days, we didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember just begging, good Lord, Jesus, please let my mom wake up this time. Give her another chance. And that time, thank God for me, my mom did wake up. And we did get that second chance. And she eventually got clean and sober, and now we're in a great place. But we know that with the deadly fentanyl that's coming across the southern border today, Kamala Harris has let the Mexican drug cartels turn this state and turn this country into a drug trafficking zone. I really believe that if the poison Kamala Harris lets come over the border in 2024 was coming over 10 years ago, that we wouldn't have got that second chance with my mother. And so we say to Kamala Harris, to every illegal alien, to every person who has contributed to this border crisis, we need a president that's going to go to war with the Mexican drug cartels, not invite him to do business in this country. And that's why we're going to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. My friends, this is not rocket science. You go down to the southern border. I've been twice, by the way, and our illustrious border czar Kamala Harris has been all of 0 times. You go down to the southern border, and they'll tell you, we just want to do our jobs. We want a president who allows us to enforce the border to keep this country that all of us love safe. We just want Donald Trump. We want Donald Trump because he's going to make it possible for us to enforce the border. We want Donald Trump because he's going to make it possible for us to keep these drugs out of our country. And we want somebody who says to law enforcement, we've got your back, instead of trying to tear us down. That is what we get with the President Donald Trump, and that's why we got to put him back in the Oval Office. Now, here's something that really bothers me about the American media. And like I said, I'll take a couple of questions here afterwards. But what I've noticed from the Kamala Harris campaign, it's not just that her border policies are a total nightmare. It's that Kamala Harris thinks that you're a bad person for thinking that she's doing a bad job. And you see this in some of her messaging over the last couple of weeks, where we've talked about the unbelievable toll that has been caused by illegal immigration. There are communities in the state of Ohio where car insurance rates are going up because the migrant flood that Kamala Harris has let come into our country has made the streets less safe to drive. And of course, that means the car insurance rates go up too. We've got local services, local schools, even in this state, even some of our small towns in the state of North Carolina, where they've had a massive influx of children who don't even speak English. And I've got nothing against those children, by the way, but when you drop a bunch of kids into our rural school districts that don't speak English, then who suffers? It's the children in those districts who deserve to get a good education and aren't, because of Kamala Harris's policies. And I happen to believe that we are, my friends, I think that we're the most compassionate country in the whole world, and I don't want to change that. But for American leadership, our compassion must start with American citizens. It must start with people right here at home. Kamala Harris, she doesn't want to debate that. She doesn't want to debate the costs of the migrant invasion. She doesn't want to debate these issues. She'd rather censor you. And the main tool of censorship under today's Democratic Party, under Kamala Harris's leadership, is to call all the people who are complaining about this migration problem a racist. Even though, by the way, many of the people who are complaining about her open border come from every walk of life and every skin color in our country. Well, I think we should send a message to Kamala Harris, and we ought to stand up for the hardworking Americans who are mad about the border because it's made their communities less safe and it's made their lives less affordable. message to Kamala Harris is, how dare you call people a racist for wanting to close down that wide open border? Our message to Kamala Harris is, how dare you call the citizens of your own country bad people because they don't want a flood of illegal migration in their country? Kamala Harris, how dare you attack the citizens of your own country for not wanting their children to die of fentanyl overdoses? Kamala Harris, how dare you call the citizens of your own country bad people? You're a bad person for causing this border crisis. We are not bad people for complaining about it. Let me just talk about one final issue, my friends, and then we'll take some questions from reporters. You know, a lot of this stuff is, like I said, it's not always easy. Politics is not always wave a magic wand and make these problems go away. But the affordability crisis, because Kamala Harris refuses to answer the question of what she would do to lower the price of groceries and housing, of food and everything else for American citizens, Donald Trump and I have a very, very simple answer, and it starts with energy. It starts with a very simple principle: drill, baby, drill. You want to lower Americans' prices. Because here's what Kamala Harris has done. In the name of environmental policy, and of course we all believe in clean air and water. We want our children to grow up in this beautiful country that is clean of environmental toxins. But what she has done is, in the name of environmental policy, she has encouraged the offshoring. She's encouraged us to ship all of our energy and manufacturing jobs to China, which is, by the way, the dirtiest economy in the history of the world. If you care about energy and you care about the environment and you want a clean environment, but also if you just want American jobs, unleash the American energy sector, unleash the American energy worker. Stop shipping this stuff overseas. We got plenty of it right here at home. Let's get it from our own territory with our own workers. And if we do that, my friends, we're going to lower the cost of everything. Because everything, Donald Trump says this all the time, everything requires energy. You want to talk about why our farmers are struggling? Because everything from the diesel fuel that they use to the fertilizer they use has gotten more expensive because of Kamala Harris's energy policies. You want to talk about why groceries are more expensive? Let's talk about the fact that our truck drivers are paying way more for diesel than they were 3 years ago, and they're, of course, the ones who are driving the groceries to the grocery store in the first place. You want to talk about why all of our manufactured goods, our construction equipment is more expensive? It's because it takes energy to make this stuff, and you jack up the cost of energy, and you're going to make Americans poor. So to Kamala Harris, we have one final message on the economy, and I've got some advice for you, Kamala, on how you can answer this question about your specific plans. No more word salad about how you grew up in a middle-class family. Unleash American energy, unleash American workers. That's how you open up this country, and that's how you lower prices for American citizens. So I'm going to take some questions in just a second, but I want you, especially now while everybody's standing up here, I want you to take out your phones, and we're going to ask every single one of you to play your part. Because look, we're never going to have the biased media on our side, and we're never going to have, Kamala Harris lies about Donald Trump every single day and twice on Sunday. But what we do have is the truth, and we have all of you. So what I want every single person to do is to try to commit to getting 10 people to the polls. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is by talking about this rally, this moment on social media. And so if you would, take a photo, take a selfie, take whatever photo makes the most sense, and then post it on social media with the caption, "This is why I'm going to vote for Donald J. Trump." And if we do that, we're going to reach far more people than any reporter or any Kamala Harris campaign could want to reach, because you all have power. And here's something else. I want you to go to this website. I want to read it because I want to make sure I get it right. swampthevote.com. Go to swampthevote.com and find out how you can volunteer and how you can help us. A dear colleague of mine in the United States Senate will often say, we need to get out there as Republicans and we need to vote 10 times. And that makes people a little uncomfortable because they say, well, we're Republicans. We don't vote 10 times, we only vote once because we believe in every legal ballot counting, but only once. But here's how you go out and cast 10 ballots legally. You get yourself to the polls and you get 9 friends and family. That's how we do this in the legal and the right way. And here's the final point about this. Look, we have got 3 ways to vote now. Early voting, vote by mail, and voting on election day. And look, I am a firm believer that we ought to have election day in this country and not election season, but we are where we are. So we got to take advantage of all these pathways to vote. Because if I talk to 100 people who plan to vote for Donald Trump in 2020, 95 of them voted for Donald Trump. But then 5 of them, a kid got sick, and so they had to go pick him up from school. Or mom had something, so they had to go pick mom up and deal with some of her issues. Or, maybe they just had a late night at work and they didn't make it. The best way for us to beat the Democrats in November is to get out there and vote. So do everything you can, drag everybody across the finish line, and we're going to take this country back because of all of you. God bless you all, and thank you. So, I want to, again, thank you all for being here, and I know that we're a little behind on time, so I won't take as many questions as I normally do, but if we can, let's start with the local reporters. I unfortunately can't see it because the lights are so bright, so if you've got a microphone, just shout a question and I'll answer it.
Hey, Senator Vance. Nick Oxner at WBTV. I want to ask you about Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. The Lieutenant Governor was with you on stage, with you, and trying to ask the question, if you'll let me ask it. The Lieutenant Governor was on...
I know I get this.
Senator, the Lieutenant Governor was on stage with you and the former president at your August 21st rally in Asheboro, but he's not here with you today. He wasn't with the former president in Wilmington in the wake of the CNN investigation. Is there something disqualifying about the comments uncovered by CNN that wasn't disqualifying about any of the previous comments he made?
Is that the question? Look. Here's my view on the Lieutenant Governor. First of all, what he said or didn't say is ultimately between him and the people of North Carolina. The people of North Carolina are going to make that decision. Now, look, I've seen some of the statements. I haven't seen them all. Some of them are pretty gross. To put it mildly, Mark Robinson says that those statements are false, that he didn't actually speak them. So I think it's up to Mark Robinson to make his case to the people of North Carolina that those weren't his statements, and I'm going to let him make that case. But look, I got to say, this entire episode illustrates something that is fundamentally broken about the American media. You've got in this country right now a record number of Americans who are dying of fentanyl overdoses thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. You've got a record number of young Americans who can't afford to buy a home thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. And you've got a record number of Americans who are struggling to buy groceries thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. The media ought to focus on Kamala Harris and her failure. More interested in pursuing policies that correct the problems of Kamala Harris. A sex scandal in North Carolina is between the Lieutenant Governor and the people of North Carolina. They're going to make their decision, and we support them.
Senator Vance, Julie with WCNC Charlotte. I'm curious about the debate, how you're feeling ahead of it, how you're preparing, and should this be the last debate of the election cycle?
Well, look, I think one thing that's true about the debates, and whether it should be the last debate of the election cycle, is that Donald Trump accepted a debate on Fox News and Kamala Harris ran from it. And if you think about the difference, You think about the difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Donald Trump did a hostile debate with CNN, a network that's not friendly to him. He did a hostile debate with ABC where, remember, the moderators fact-checked him multiple times and didn't fact-check Kamala Harris when she said outrageous things. Remember, Kamala Harris, just a few weeks ago, you had American troops who were nearly killed in an attack by Iranian militias, and Kamala Harris had the audacity to say there are no troops in active combat. Where was the fact check from ABC for that? And look, if Kamala Harris wants to go on Fox News or wants to do some hostile interviews, we welcome her to do that. But what me and Donald Trump are going to keep on doing is going everywhere and talking to everybody. We talk to the hostile media, we talk to the friendly media, we talk to the national media, we talk to the local media, and we do it because we think the American people deserve leaders who try to earn their vote instead of expecting it to be given to them. Next one.
Senator Vance, thank you so much for answering questions. I am Casey Jones with WCCB. I want to ask you, you're talking about hostility, so looking at how things are going in Springfield, Ohio right now, where you made claims that Haitian migrants were eating pets that have since been debunked, there are threats to the community, things are hostile. Knowing that America's so divided right now, would you change anything about the way you spread those now debunked false claims?
Well, what I have a responsibility to do in Springfield, Ohio, or any constituency in the state of Ohio, and if, God willing, the American people honor me by making me their next vice president, this will be my responsibility for the whole country. My responsibility is to listen to the people that I serve and not a biased media. And that's what I'll keep on doing in Springfield, Ohio, or anywhere else. One thing I've learned, and I really do think it's a difference between me and President Trump and the Kamala Harris campaign, is that we listen to people and we try to understand where they're coming from. And think about this, that I've learned this in just 2 years in the United States Senate. When there was a train disaster in East Palestine, Ohio, a lot of residents came to me and told me a lot of things. And some of those things it ended up being not totally true. They were based on rumors. But most of those things ended up being based on reality. And they were treated like enemies by the American media for daring to complain about what's going on in their country. And I'll tell you, I promise that as your next vice president, to the American people, to the people of this great state of North Carolina, I will always listen to you. Even when the media attacks me, I will listen to you about what's going on in your communities, because that's what a leader ought to do. And the final point that I'll make there is that everything that's going on in Springfield, Ohio, first of all, it comes from Kamala Harris's wide open borders. A small town in Ohio, 20,000 migrants into that community. It has stressed every local service. I wish the American media was half as interested in the stress on the local schools, the stress on the hospitals, and unaffordable housing as they are in debunking a story that comes from the residents of Springfield. And you know, the final point that I'll make on this is, it is interesting to me to listen to the American media where they will descend on a town. I've had constituent inbound from inquiries from Springfield, Ohio, just in the last couple of weeks, where, you know what they'll say to us? They'll say, hey, this thing's going on in our community. Could you help us investigate it? But please don't put my name out there publicly, because every person who speaks up has 15 news media reporters show up at their doorstep. And to all of the reporters who are listening to these words, whether they're national reporters or local reporters, did you ever think about listening to people instead of harassing them? Did you ever think about telling the truth instead of accepting the word? Did you ever think about listening to people speak their truth instead of listening to some bureaucrat and assuming that everything that they tell you is true? Journalism in this country is increasingly a disgrace. It's about investigating the truth, and unfortunately, far too few reporters do that today. Next question.
Senator Vance,
Yeah.
thank you for taking our question. This is Kelly Kendall from WXII. You just called North Carolina a second home to you, but you also said that you want to leave this situation between voters and Mark Robinson. So I just want to give you one more chance here. Will you continue to support Mark Robinson in this campaign?
Look, I'll continue to support the people of North Carolina. That's what my job is as their next vice president. It's not to tell them. Look, I have spent so much time in this state, and I love this state. It is beautiful. You guys have one of the rare, thank you, we have one of the rare combinations of beautiful mountains and beautiful beaches right here in the state of North Carolina. You ought to be proud of it. I joke with my wife that Ohio also has mountains and beaches, and she says, well, the hills of southeastern Ohio don't count, and Lake Erie doesn't count as a beach. So you guys kind of have us beat on the beachfront. But look, the people of North Carolina, when I'm here, and this is the second event I've done today, you know what I hear about? I hear about concerns regarding inflation. I hear about affordability. I hear from young people who want to be able to afford a home and worried they're never going to be able to. I hear heartbreaking stories from people who say, you know, my parents, they got married and they worked and they were able to afford a home to raise a family in, and I'm worried that's never going to be true for me and my children. Those are the people whose problems I am focused on, not a sex scandal, and not something that I think is fundamentally, the voters of North Carolina are focused on the right issues, and that's what our campaign is going to focus on too. All right. And let's do one more question before we hit the road.
Hi, Senator Kit Maher. I just want to clear up, does a Trump campaign still endorse Mark Robinson? And number second question is about your debate prep. It's reported that you are enlisting the help of Tom Emmer to sit in for Tim Walz. Could you talk about that choice and how you're preparing for the debate? Yeah, well, look, Tom Emmer is a great representative from the state of Minnesota. He has not helped us out yet, but I think that we are going to try to call on him in the next couple of weeks as we really start to, think about how to make our best case during this debate. But look, on the Mark Robinson question, Kit, you've heard me answer it now 2 times. I've been asked, I think, 5 questions. Now, three of those questions have been about what Mark Robinson did or did not say 20 years ago on a message board. As I've said, that is Mark Robinson's case to make to the people of North Carolina. I'm not going to make it for him, and the people of North Carolina, they get to be the judges of whether they believe him or not. It's really that simple. Now, but I really cannot believe that the American media is so much more focused on this than on the struggles of their fellow citizens. What happened? What happened to speaking truth to power? What happened to investigating the truth? If the American media wants to focus on a sex scandal, there are plenty of supermarket tabloids that are welcome, that would love to have you. Let's focus on the real issues that affect North Carolina. And it's, look, final point I'll make on this. Look, people have found, somebody just behind me said Bill Clinton. That's a good point.
Bill Clinton spoke at the Democratic National Convention. How many questions have been asked about his very interesting history? But what I'm focused on is not Bill Clinton or Mark Robinson's history. It's how to make the lives of the people of this state better. One thing I wish that I could do for every single person in this room, even the journalists, is I wish that I could take you on our campaign plane and give you the perspective that I've gotten of this country in the past 7 weeks. This is the coolest, other than being a wife to this beautiful lady here and a father to our 3 kids, the greatest honor of my life has been running for this office of Vice President of the United States. And I'll tell you, you see this country through an incredible perspective when you run to be its next vice president. I mean, from the beautiful deserts of Arizona to the mountains of Western North Carolina, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world, and we ought to be proud of it. I believe we've got natural resources that the Chinese and the Russians would literally kill for. We have an incredible, bountiful land in addition to having the most beautiful country in the world. And I believe we've got the best people and the best workers anywhere on the face of the earth. The only thing that is broken about this country is the failed leadership of Kamala Harris. Let's fire her and send Donald Trump to the White House, and let's do it together. God bless you guys. Thank you all for having me.
Why don't we liberate these United States? We're the ones who need it worst. Let the rest of the world help us for change, and let's rebuild the very first. Our highways and bridges are falling apart. Who's blessed? Who has been